Russia launched an overnight air attack against Ukraine on Sunday, sending missiles over other northern and central parts of the country, authorities said. The Ukrainian military reported shooting down 4 cruise missiles out of up to 8 total airborne targets detected, adding that the rest of the targets were probably false. It also said there were no immediate reports of strikes. The governor of Kyiv region, Ruslan Kravchenko, said 2 people had been wounded and 10 buildings damaged by falling missile debris in one unspecified area of the region. Thanks to the professional work of the air defense forces, there were no strikes on critical or residential infrastructure, he said in a statement. All of Ukraine was under air raid alerts for about 3 hours early on Sunday before they were cleared at around 6 a.m. 0300 GMT. Russia has carried out a campaign of regular air strikes involving missiles and drones against Ukrainian targets far from the front line as part of its 18-month-old full-scale invasion. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry said on the Telegram messaging channel on Sunday that its forces had shot down 2 drones overnight in the Bryansk and Kursk regions, which both border Ukraine. The regime in Kyiv made further attempts to commit terror attacks using fixed-wing drones on targets in the Russian Federation during the night and in the morning of August 27, the ministry said. It gave no information about possible casualties or damage. The governor of Kursk region, Roman Starovoy, posted pictures on his Telegram channel which he said showed damage caused by a drone to an apartment block in the city of Kursk, with windows blown out. Drone attacks on Russian targets, especially in Crimea, annexed by Moscow in 2014 and in regions bordering Ukraine, have become almost a daily occurrence since 2 drones were destroyed over the Kremlin in early May. The attacks have disrupted flights in and out of Moscow in recent weeks. Ukraine rarely takes direct responsibility for such drone strikes but says destroying Russian military infrastructure helps a counter-offensive begun by Kyiv in June. Russians launch 11 missile and 32 air strikes on Ukraine during the day, General Staff report. Over the past day, Russian troops launched 11 missile and 32 air strikes on the territory of Ukraine and carried out 38 attacks from multiple launch rocket systems. 23 combat clashes took place. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Details: At night, the Russians struck again with air-launched cruise missiles. As a result of successful combat work by the forces and means of the air forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, 4 cruise missiles were destroyed. During the day, the Russians carried out 11 missile and 32 air strikes and carried out 38 attacks from multiple launch rocket systems on the positions of Ukrainian troops and populated areas. The Russian terrorist attacks unfortunately resulted in casualties among the civilian population. Residential buildings, schools and other civil infrastructure were destroyed. The likelihood of missile and air strikes across Ukraine remains high. During the day, 23 combat clashes took place. The operational situation on the Volyn and Polishcha fronts remained unchanged. On the Severshchina and Slobozhenshchina fronts, the Russians launched an airstrike near Kindrativka in Sumy Oblast. They carried out mortar and artillery attacks on more than 25 settlements, in particular, Krinivka, Kliasi, Lyskivshchina, Chernihiv Oblast, Saradina Buda, Vilna Sloboda, Symykin, Volfin, Kindrativka, Sadki, Sumy Oblast, and Oka, Streleka, Olyeniko, Hadish and Nestern, Kharkiv Oblast. On the Kupiansk front, the Russians launched airstrikes near Nadia, Tverdoklubov and Myasozherivka, Luhansk Oblast. The settlements of Kamyanka, Sinkivka, Ivanivka, Kyslivka and Berestov, Kharkiv Oblast were subjected to Russian artillery and mortar attacks. On the Lyman front, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive actions near Novohorivka in Luhansk Oblast. More than 10 settlements, in particular Karmazinivka, Nevsky, Chervenopopivka, Kremina, Kuzmin, Luhansk Oblast, Torsky, Dubrova and Spern, Donetsk Oblast were hit by Russian artillery fire. On the Bakhmut front, the Russians carried out unsuccessful offensive actions near Klishivka in Donetsk Oblast. More than 10 settlements, including Vashukivka, Markov, Chasev Yar, Ivanovsky, Bila Hora, and New York Donetsk Oblast were affected by Russian artillery fire. On the Avdiivka front, the settlements of Karamik, Novokulino, Avdiivka, Karlivka, Pervomaysk, and Nevelsky Donetsk Oblast came under Russian artillery and mortar fire. On the Marinka front, the defense forces continue to hold back the advance of Russian troops near Marinka in Donetsk Oblast. The Russians carried out an airstrike near Krasnohorivka in Donetsk Oblast. The settlements of Oleksandropol, Hostre, Marinka, Hobita, Paraskoviivka, and Vodiant Donetsk Oblast were hit by artillery fire. On the Shakhtarsk front, the Russians launched an airstrike near Zolotaniva in Donetsk Oblast. The settlements of Bowa-Avlenka, Shakhtarsk, Ramivka, Staromayorsk, and Rivnopil Donetsk Oblast were affected by Russian artillery shelling. On the Zaporizhia front, the Russians carried out airstrikes near Mala-Tokhmichka, Robotyne and Novodanilivka, Zaporizhia Oblast. More than 20 settlements, including Novoandriivka, Olhaivsky, Chervon, Huliaipilsky, Yahorivka and Mali Sherbeki, Zaporizhia Oblast were affected by the artillery shelling. On the Kherson front, the Russians carried out airstrikes near Mykolaievka, Mykilsky and Antonivka, Kherson Oblast. More than 10 settlements were affected by Russian artillery fire: Zimivka, Tomarin, Burhunka, Tyainka, Kherson, Bilozerka and others. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian defense forces maintain their offensive on the Melitopol front, consolidating their positions and conducting counter-battery efforts. During the day, the Ukrainian Air Force made 10 strikes on personnel concentration areas and 1 strike on the Russian anti-aircraft missile systems. During the day, units of rocket forces and artillery hit 1 ammunition storage point, 2 radio-electronic warfare stations, and 3 pieces of artillery at firing positions. Previously, the Prime Minister of Lithuania, Ingrid Simonite, believes that Russian President Vladimir Putin chose the strategy of a grueling war against Ukraine in order to influence the position of Western democracies. She addressed the issue at a discussion festival, Ukrinform reports citing Delphi. So far, it seems that Putin's strategy is a war of attrition, a long one, Simonite said. In her opinion, with the help of such a strategy, the Russian Federation will try to hamper the pace and scale of assistance flows into Ukraine to help the nation repel Russian aggression. Then political parties will come to power in the West, according to the Kremlin's plans, that will stop supporting Ukraine altogether. I see that this option is real, Simonite said. As Ukrinform reported earlier, at the NATO Public Forum in Vilnius on July 11, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said the war against Russian aggression in Ukraine was turning into a war of attrition, so the Allies should provide Ukraine with as much ammunition as possible. Russia has already lost about 260,270 troops in Ukraine, plus 640 over the past day. The relevant statement was made by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook, and Ukrinform correspondent reports.